So the two of you, I have to say, have really succeeded at what I was hoping, which was making me really depressed and then hopeful at the same time, and kind of, you know,
a little angry too.
Yeah, not hiding from the difficulties or the dramatic kind of situation which a lot of organizations find themselves in, particularly in the news business. But I think a lot of other companies in other categories are facing really similar situations. You know, you look at the music business. They might even be a couple years ahead of you guys in terms of crisis. And there are a lot of other big businesses, you know, heading into this period of
advertising's next, retail's along the way, education is up for more than it knows.
So I think we all need to be really sort of alert to what's happening in this space. Let me take a couple questions from the audience. I've already got one by Twitter as well. Yes, down in the front.
Hi, my name's Michelle Siegel. I work for UNICEF. And my question's for Vivian. So I was driving into work one morning listening to NPR, and I heard that Monsanto was a corporate sponsor. And you know, what pops into mind for me when I think of Monsanto is it's that, you know, it's the world's leading promoter of genetically modified foods, and it is, you know, trying to make people pay for the intellectual property rights to use, you know, plant genetics. And so I thought, wow, NPR is a sellout. And when I think of NPR, I also think of, you know, an extremely ethical brand and one that gives voice to people who don't have voices, to issues that, you know, maybe the world isn't necessarily so concerned about, but that doesn't get into the mainstream media. And, you know, I think it's like a trusted source of news, and I think this quality is really precious. So my question is, how do you value that in your corporate partnerships? And secondly, how do you protect it?
No, this is a good question, thank you. We are deeply, ferociously protective of our journalistic ethics. And, you know, the famous line about journalism to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable holds true today, and by the way, on any platform. I mean, that holds true no matter what, even if it's on Twitter. Our sponsors, however, and we are unbiased, we take no sides, we take no issues. There is a strict firewall between our coverage and our sponsors. The sponsor does not affect our coverage. In fact, if you listen to us long enough and hear our sponsorship, you will find inherent conflicts. In terms of our sponsors, we do not, in the same way that we are completely unbiased in our news, it is not for us to discriminate against a company that is operating perfectly legally. You may find their activities unethical, others may feel differently. They're not engaging I mean, their company doesn't exist to engage in criminal activity. I'm not defending Monsanto, I'm saying we are completely agnostic about that. And it would be, frankly, I believe, discriminatory for us to say, well, one of us has issues with Monsanto, therefore we're not going to take that sponsorship. I mean, that's part of our ethical code. So I sleep well at night over that issue.
Another issue, Karine, down the front.
Hi. With declining brand advertising dollar, as you mentioned, and the notion that content should be free, except on mobile platforms, which is kind of interesting, I was curious, how would you, Jeff, apply your model to a media company or even either industries, as David mentioned, that are not news-driven and have no opportunities locally?
Let me just ask a little more, let me understand more. Opportunities in terms of, give me an example of what you're asking. Mike back. Sure. The challenge.
I work for Ziff Davis.
Ziff Davis?
Ziff Davis, oh, okay, right.
We're not news, we're like B2B media. Right. So no news, we have no opportunity to be local.
I think the first opportunity you have is in relationships. You have, as Vivian said about NPR's audience, you have a wise crowd who knows a lot of stuff. So how do you then bring some of that out? I would operate in things like blog networks. I look at glam.com, full disclosure, I'm an advisor. where I think that, because I believe in the model that they have. John Byrne, the ex-#2 editor of Business Week, announced today that he's going to start basically a Huffington Post in business. And I sat there and mapped out GLAM on my whiteboard for him, saying, and damn it, I want my equity. Because what he sees is the opportunity to not just create a content company where we employ everyone who creates everything, we own and control everything. What if you become more of a platform and think about how you can enable others who are starting to cover these B2B areas, who know stuff, and you can help them. And so, as on the local example of the Washington Post employee walking out, can you go to a blogger who's covering one of your technology areas, as Ziff Davis, and say, we're going to sell your ads, we're going to promote you, we're going to help train you to be better, we may provide technology for you. It's good for us because we can get more reach to a new audience at low cost, no to low cost, and risk. And you can scale much bigger then in incredible ways. So I think you've got to break out of the model of saying that we are a content company that creates stuff and think of yourself as a platform that finds value in relationships and succeeds Google-like, pardon me for the plug, when others succeed.
So companies that think they're selling products need to realize that they also need to be media companies, and media companies need to realize they're not really selling media, they're selling relationships. Okay, just to tie together a couple themes from the day.
Fit that in a tweet.
Yeah, that was well done, actually.
Let's see, over here.
Thank you. Jeff, you touched on this already. It concerns education. I don't want to distract us from your subject here. But looking at your model, it seems universities we're part of the same business. We're not quite so up to date as the news media are, perhaps, but we're in the same business of information, knowledge, maybe wisdom. And I'm looking at your chart. It seems to me most universities are hiding behind their brands, or could be accused of that. And there are many ways to deliver. There's proliferation of information. And frankly, all the things that both of you addressed, I think, would also affect universities. I'd be just interested in your take on that.
Far be it from me not to take an opportunity for a plug, but if you go to my blog, buzzmachine.com, you'll see a text of a speech I gave at TEDx New York Ed a few weeks ago, where I stood on stage and my first line was, "This is bullshit," as this is, right? That I'm up here lecturing you, you know more about this than I do, you all know more about this than I do, as Vivian said about NPR's audience. And so part of what we have to do is change that essential structure. There's also the same inefficiency there. Do we really need tens of thousands of instructors across the world rewriting the same lecture about capillary action, right? It is inefficient as rewriting AP stories to put your own name on it. Now, you had to before because you didn't have YouTube, but now you have YouTube U, and there are opportunities yet barely explored to create new structure. I talked about this with Bob Carey at the New School. I think he's still there. And he said, what do I do to compete with these great lecturers at MIT and Stanford? And as we brainstormed about it, we were thinking that maybe the great lecturer is almost a media company and gets the media attention and the media value, but then at a local level, you have tutoring. And you change the relationship in education another way. That's one. Two, the other thing I said at that TEDx New York, I'm sorry, I'm being profane today, but screw it. Fuck the SATs. That we're in an industrial age structure where we're stamping out everyone.
This is an adult conference, right? Okay.
Yes.
We cleared everyone before they get. They're all over 18, Jeff.
We're stamping out everybody with the same damned answer when that doesn't create Googles in the world. And so we've got to change the structure. I think we have to turn universities into incubators.
Question in the far back. I don't think we've heard from you yet today.
By the way, I'm trying to start an incubator at CUNY and raising money for it right now while we're going here. To just do that, to bring entrepreneurship to journalism.
Hi, I got a question for both of you, I guess. As we've seen technology move from push to pull, and now we're going back to push again, I'm really curious, your take on the fact that as we look at predictive filtering and you think about the Pandora effect to news streams or friend streams, or us selecting and computers predicting what information we want, what impact do you think that's going to have for society at large when we are pretty much slowly building up our own walls of ignorance just to please ourselves versus getting a wide range of information that would open us versus what makes us comfortable?
So, I was going to say you could start it. Well, I don't,
You're one of the cures.
Yes, well, thank you for that lead-in. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Jeff's bubble chart, or what do you call it? I don't know. I didn't go to business school, so I haven't gotten all the names of the charts down. I think it's correct, and I subscribe to it. Although I think actually brand still has a role in the sense of the brand as it represents trust, and I think that there is I mean, I am not a believer that people will only seek out their own. Yes, you know what? I'm going to use myself as an example. I shouldn't admit this, but I obsessively check my news feed on Facebook, which is about as customized and filtered and algorithmically driven and personalized to me as it comes. But that's not all I look at. It's an important news source for me, and I pick up a lot of great stuff. But I also read the New York Times, and I read the Wall Street Journal, and I listen to NPR, and I go to other sources. And I think we need to move away from the sense, I think we need to have a greater faith in people that they are smart enough to figure out that we can get our personalized, customized information, but we will still be attracted to authoritative news sources with brands that we trust, that give us stories that we didn't know we were interested, that serendipity again. So I'm not particularly apocalyptic about this issue.
Yeah, I think the brand does have value, but not as a magnet, more as a label. That when you land there, you say, or I'm going to choose from these 5 things. Which one am I going to choose? I'm going to choose it because it's NPR and I trust that brand and it means something to me. Pew did a survey in 2004, a few years ago now, that found that people who were online, where we think it's an echo chamber, in fact knew more about their opponent's arguments than people who operated offline. Insert Fox News joke here. But I think that part of the thing is we do see the argument. The argument is a means of communicating different viewpoints. What we're seeing now is not the controlled world of media where we package the world every day in a box with a bow on it and said, here, you're welcome. We instead see the cacophony of democracy. And it's deafening at first, but I find it beautiful.
I've got one question that came in on Twitter asking about NPR and revenue. How much revenue comes from the Sirius satellite radio contract? Percentage or actual numbers? Does it come anywhere near Howard Stern's? Talking about very different media brands.
Baba Booey.
Actually, there's a confidentiality clause in our contract, so I can't tell you what they pay us, but I can tell you, I guarantee it's not even in the same universe as Howard Stern, and while we are happy to be on Sirius XM and we very much appreciate the revenue, it is not it's not a meaningful, significant part of our business. That's the best I can do.
Okay.
I'm glad you're there because I listened to you.
Yeah, well, good, me too.
Tony, who's going to be moderating one of our panels tomorrow.
I have to admit I'm a marketing professor, so it was quite interesting to listen to the both of you. When I listened to you, I get the impression that the core or the main, let's say, challenge for the journalists will be in the future that they have to learn, they have to change themselves, and the core competence, what they really need is how to build deep relationships. And if I look at a lot of journalists, I'm not sure if they will make it. Can you answer that question?
Not sure there's a what?
If they can make it, because I think their core competence and their personality was different in the past.
I will tell you that we have our newsroom at NPR is 300 people. By newsroom is a figurative term, doesn't mean literally in a room, but it's all of the people who are either reporters or editors or deeply involved with assignments, journalistic activity at NPR. We have now, it took us a year and a half, thanks to a grant from the Knight Foundation, we have put every one of our journalists through digital training. We're just finishing now, we're bringing in all our foreign correspondents in 2 by 2, they're living their post, although every time one of them leaves, some huge news event happens, our Moscow, anyway, that's another story. They're getting digital training, every single one of them. And I will tell you, there's people there that have been there for a long time, people who, you know, could be here quite audibly. You hear them in the hallways going like, yeah, I know this web thing's important, but, you know, can't we just, you know, we'll deal with it in a couple of years, you know, when we get some other things straightened out. And it has been, I completely attribute that training to a sea change in the productivity and the approach. And they're not being taught to code, they're not just learning how to, it's understanding the
tool for their journalism.
Thank you. Yes, it is absolutely a tool, and if I can, since you've been plugging, I'll make one plug. I sent an email earlier to the head of the Knight Foundation, Alberto Embarguin, saying that he deserves the credit for the fact that earlier today it was announced that NPR.org won a Peabody Award. And I think it is because it could not have happened before that digital training, when all these extraordinary journalists who know how to tell stories got these new set of tools and learned how to do their brand of storytelling in a different language. So,
Mazel tov.
yeah, thank you.
Real quickly, this is why we're teaching different things at school. I teach journalism school, right? So we teach students, our students who are working with the New York Times on their blog, The Local, their primary job is not to write stories, though that's the reflex. Their primary job is to go recruit members of the community, train them, help them report on themselves, because that's the only way we're going to scale here and improve the journalism that's done. That's why I teach a course in entrepreneurial journalism, and thanks to a grant from the McCormick Foundation, we have $100,000 in seed money out there starting 7 new businesses now. One could say I've corrupted the temple of journalism, but by God, I think because we didn't learn business back in my day, it means we became very poor stewards of journalism, and that's a lot of the reason we're in the mess we're in today. They have to learn how to use these tools to operate collaboratively. We have only begun to start to collaborate, and that's where the huge opportunity and savings are. And things like data as news. There's just unbelievable frontiers here. It's a very exciting time, but absolutely not the old sit down, do rewrite, get the scotch out of the bottom drawer is gone.
The scotch is still there. But
we've got time for a couple more questions. Down in front. Let's get you the mic.
In this new local model, how you get fact-checking involved?
You mean, do we still fact check?
Well, if it's all
And
done
how?
on just like the local bloggers,
Yeah.
and not so much,
Well,
I'm not so worried about NPR, but more of these
Oh,
local.
well,
It's me who's corrupting the world.
yeah.
What about these
They're
new
out there.
organizations?
Yeah,
there's
well,
wonderful new tools for fact checking. But
right. I mean, my readers fact check me all the time.
yeah.
Hey, asshole, right?
Yeah.
So, and in fact, when was the last time you watched network news and saw a correction? If I don't correct quickly and strike out and leave the error there, then the ethic I have learned there of the correction, if I don't link to the original source and show my provenance and work in footnotes, then that's a problem. The phrase "show your work" just came out of you. Is it perfect? Absolutely friggin' not. No. But this is where reputation matters, and we're going to develop new reputation systems, and why Clay Shirky, 5th time, wants algorithmic authority. We're going to have to figure this out. But the old method of saying that we had a fact checker there, I'm afraid that's already gone in magazines and newspapers.
Richard, down in the front.
Thank you, David. Richard Cacciato, Blue Iceberg Interactive. Well, I'm really intrigued by the fact that the two of you represent different business models. Jeff, you talked about business models. So
Don't let Vivian fool you. She is a business person.
No, I understand. But Vivian, your organization has the great fortune of being endowed. Okay,
go ahead,
but
all right.
let me finish, and you may
She's
correct
selling
you.
ads. They don't just
Let me finish, and then you can correct me, as Jeff said.
Yeah.
So your organization has the great benefit of being endowed and being supported by fanatical members, I'm one, who really believe in the concept of news as a common good that needs to be supported. Okay, in other countries, you know, it's done sometimes well or not well through taxes. We do it through national public radio and support through member stations. Jeff, you've talked about this shift in the business model to entrepreneurial journalism. I have a very good friend who is a journalist who, you know, lost her job at a major publication. She writes a blog. It's a very popular blog. She's trying to figure out, you know, how do I monetize this? She gets 5,000 hits a day. She's very popular. She's been on all the major news shows. So I'm just really curious about, you know, how do you see it from your point of view, Vivian, where, you know, yes, I understand that you run your organization as a business, but you are somewhat insulated from the for-profit world, at least to our perception. And Jeff, you're talking about being out in the rough and tumble, but the reality is, you know, how does somebody support themselves? What's the secret sauce, and how do you reconcile the two different positions?
Well, first I wish we were insulated from the rough and tumble world, or I'm mixing these two up. We're not. In fact, we got hit pretty hard when the economy went down yesterday. I mentioned all our various revenue streams in sponsorship, which went down. You know, one of the beauties of being in a public company where 990s are filed is, unlike in a commercial, I mean, I can tell all my numbers. I'm not going to get, get accused of insider, giving people information for insider trading. So I can tell you exactly what that endowment is and how much it supports us. Our budget right now is about $160 million. And the idea with a not-for-profit is you try to, you try to make more than you spend just so that you have a little bit of surplus. I'm stating the obvious, but it's not going back to shareholders. You get reinvested. Of that $160 million budget, which we obviously have to match from revenue, it's not a small amount, but it's not as big as you think. About $8 million is interest earned on the endowment that we have, and we are fantastically grateful to have that endowment, mostly from huge bequest from Joan Kroc, the widow of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. But it is an endowment. It cannot be touched. It must not be touched. It should not be touched. We do get interest earnings, so it's about $8 million on a base of 160. Fantastic, but it's not hardly insulating us. The rest of it comes from sponsorship, which is subject to the vagaries to a certain extent of the advertising market and our skill at being able to convey why NPR is a good platform for sponsors. It comes from membership, which, yes, it is people that believe in what we do, but it's, there's a business model to that. I like to say we have the oldest pay model in legacy media. It just happens to be voluntary. We actually don't solicit funds from listeners directly. Stations do, but then stations pay us for our programming. And then, the philanthropy game, which is tough rowing. And then, of course, our tote bags.
Tote bags. Another
kidding,
retailer.
I'm kidding. That doesn't make it sense.
Right. So we don't know the answer. Right? We just simply don't. That's why we've got to work so hard to figure this out. That's why I'm teaching entrepreneurial journalism. That's why I want to start an incubator at CUNY to enable new businesses to start. That's why I'm tired of the whining and moaning in the industry. We've got to figure it out. But the fact that we did this research, we found best practices, and we found some journalists who are making a living doing this now, doing journalism. They're covering cats up trees too, but they're covering their towns and they're doing things. You have things like TechCrunch that are terribly successful in a tech world, which is the real answer back to Ziff Davis is do what they do, or have them buy you now, one or the other. Well, it used to be you'd buy them. Too late. Sorry, that horse is out of the barn and over the horizon and gone. So we've got to figure this out. So I want to make clear I do not have the answers here, but. I think that we do see the possibilities here because the cost structure is so low, because you do what you do best and link to the rest, because you specialize, because you have platforms and tools that make it possible to create an entire media empire for zero cost. I was just with a publisher of a newspaper company. I guess I can say it out loud. I'm on the advisory board of Journal Register. They have a new amazing president named John Payton, who was at Imprimedia, the largest Spanish language publisher in the US. He did amazing things there. He's now going to try to do it here. I speculated about how we can do their entire publishing system in the cloud with Google Docs and WordPress and Flickr. We really could. So if you're just a person starting up, you can certainly start anything there. So the cost structure is really low. We don't talk about that because it's uncomfortable, because people are going to lose their jobs over that. But the truth is, the duplication is huge, the inefficiency is huge, we waste money on production, we waste money on ego. 15,000 journalists going to the conventions is a horrendous waste of money because nothing freaking happens there you can't see on C-SPAN. So we have to rethink the value of what our industry is, what it really brings. And then if you think bottom up, it starts to be doable. So your friend needs to have more traffic, and needs to do that by having relationships with people where she's going to get the traffic. She has to think virally and think socially and get lots of traffic out there. She's already using media well. But the biggest thing I think has to happen is she can't go approach big advertisers and sponsors on her own, so she needs the structure to join networks. And we've got to find the ways and create the ways to band together, and that's why I built that into our local ecosystem, because I think without that, it's going to take a lot longer to succeed.
Great. I think we're going to have to wrap this up to move on to the last part of the day. But thank you so much, Vivian Schiller and Jeff Jarvis.